Well, hello again, guys, and thanks so much for coming back around. We are going to jump right back in to the electrical system where we left off on the last video. We've got a gauge cluster now, so we can put that in. However, I really want to get all my lights working and the turn signal switch hooked up. So we're just going to get back to it. Come on. No, you... Over here. So I'm going to be turning the heater back on just to get it a little warmer in here. Just kind of wanted to go over where we were at the moment. I had contemplated getting the little terminal bars, the little junction blocks that Chevy ran on the inner fenders for this, even though we don't really need it. The only reason it would be really helpful is because these wires go through the tube on the radiator support, you know, and therefore if you just had terminals on the ends of wire, you could go through there. I don't think I'm going to end up doing that. I mean, I will go through the radiator support, but I think I'll just put them little male female bullet connector thingies, I don't know what you call them, in there, and put them in a loom, and that'll be fine. We're just trying to make this as simple as we can. I didn't show you on the previous video, the tail lights were working when I had the whole thing kind of hot wired up and connected, so we'll show you that in a minute. Right now I pulled the old ends off our stoplight switch, and guys, don't buy a performance tool, please. I mean, some stuff you can get away with, but a meter especially, no. Anyway, I've got my leads hooked up to the switch. I know it's terribly hard to see. It's down under the steering here and the gear shift, but when I move the lever, our varying quality of beeping changes. So we got a good stop switch down there. I wish we had a good meter. Now, maybe you're a guy that likes them life hacks and so forth. Show you a couple here that we got going on. First of all, it's really annoying on these cars when everything's so tight, working up under this dash is so tight, and then the original wiring harness, you just don't have any give, you know. Maybe there was more originally, but you know, over the last 80 years, the wire gets awfully stiff, and you just can't work on the back of the instrument panel. You can barely get it out of there, let alone, you know, past the studs, let alone get to the back of the wire or the gauges without cutting the wires out. So that's pretty annoying. So when I go back in with stuff, I like to give myself and the next guy a little more slack. So that's exactly what I do. Now, to work on it, you can build yourself some handy dandy little brackets. You know, that's just a 7-inch piece of wood, an inch wide, 7 long, and then an inch from the end. I do 2 passes with a regular old table saw blade. Gives you about a 3/16 slot there. Now, this one's, you know, the turn signal lever's in the way here, but it still works just fine. And then we put our anti-scuff pad on there, and then we can work on the wiring on our gauges, get them to a good length so they can be serviced, you know, and so forth. I've also got from Vintage, excuse me a second, Vintage Auto Garage. I always get that name wrong. I ordered that voltage reducer there for the fuel gauge. Whether it's necessary or not, I'm sure guys have run them without them and say it's just fine. This being someone else's vehicle, I don't like to take chances, so I'm cutting the voltage down from 12 to 6 with that. Got our wiring ready for that. I'm going over what I want to do for the amp gauge, the charge and discharge. I'm going to have to mix things up a little with this aftermarket wiring harness. We're going to an alternator. So I'm going to have to copy the original wiring schematic a little bit and make it work. And then our white wire here is our bulbs. So I've got to do that and then think about how many bulbs we got behind the speedo, get those all going. Another hack, you guys remember ruby fluid soldering paste? You can't find it anymore in your local Walmart, you know. I bought this online and it's sold. There's a lot of ruby fluids in liquid form and they're sold for the purpose of leading, like stained glass windows or old-fashioned windows. So I've been trying that, and it's working really well. Ruby fluid was always an awesome flux. You can find some paste tins and so forth yet on eBay. Don't know why it sort of went away from the scene in stores, but it did. And then a guy grabbed one of his wife's essential oil eyedroppers here, you know, and that's the same thread on this little 2-ounce bottle. And so a guy can just boop, boop, right on the connections, and away we go. Just some tips. I'm going to keep working on wiring, and I'll show you before we throw it in the dash. Now, if you are doing something similar, this kind of project, there are so many variables. Are you keeping it original? Are you keeping it 6 volts original? Are you changing out gauges, keeping everything original? Are you swapping out wiring harnesses, keeping it original otherwise? Are you going to 12 volts? Are you doing a universal harness and doing it different? What are you doing? You know, there's so many variables to take into consideration. All I can show you is what I'm doing. And obviously, we are sticking with the stock amperage gauge, right? And we are converting using our universal harness. You already know this. We're converting to 12 volts from 6. I highly recommend in supplement of the shop manual when you're working on these, if you're doing a wiring project, get this is from Chevrolet Service from back in the day, wiring harnesses, and you have both truck and passenger, and it's a much clearer and a little bit better labeled, and a guy's aged eyes, tired eyes can read it a little better, though you still may need a magnifying glass now and then and get in the sunlight to see the darn thing, right? Anyway, we can follow exactly what they did, and I'm just comparing this and how they wired through the ammeter with our modern wiring harness, and all they did, voltmeter, all a voltmeter's doing is giving you an indication of the voltage in the system. That's obvious, right? How many volts is in the battery? That's what you're going to see on the volt gauge. Ammeter, you are watching in real time the charge and discharge going through the ammeter, what the system is doing. When you pull out the headlights, you'll see it go down. If you're running the car above a certain RPM, the generator, in this case it'll be an alternator, is on and it's charging. You'll see it go to the positive. It's just a real-time showing of what is going on within your charging system. So that's the difference. Now, things are a little bit different. How the Ron Francis kit hooks up a voltmeter, obviously, compared to the factory did an ammeter, but it's actually not that confusing. And just to make sure I've got my ducks in a row here, I just wrote out what they did versus what we need to do, and it comes out basically the same. So on the original, you have a hot wire from the battery to the starter. That's obvious. And then that wire goes through the ammeter. And the second wire on there also just goes directly to your cigarette lighter, because you got to have a cigarette when you got to have a cigarette after all, right? Okay, at least back in 48. And then out the ammeter, it goes to the light switch, the battery generator circuit at the voltage regulator, and the ignition switch. So out of the ammeter to the charging system, the ignition switch, and your light switch. Okay, those are your three main sources where power is pulled through, and that is why they're all hooked up there, and that's showing you what's happening in the system. So on our new system, this red wire that I already have coming out here, that would go to the starter stud, that goes to the fuse block, right? That's this wire right here going to the starter stud, and that is feeding power to our fuse block. If I cut that and splice it to the ammeter in there, and then the other side I run to the starter, so I have our battery feed from the starter to the negative side of the amp gauge. I'm accomplishing the same exact thing Chevrolet did in 48. And then out of the amp gauge, I continue this battery feed to the fuse block. So all I'm going to have to do is just cut in, add some terminal ends, and we're fine, to the fuse block, to the red wire that's going to come off the back of our alternator, and to the ignition switch. Then I'm accomplishing the same thing. The light switch from the original that was hooked up there, there are two points that are getting a hot 12 volts to the light system, park lights and headlights. Those are coming out of the fuse block, so we're still getting that voltage from the same feed from the same side of the ammeter. So we're accomplishing the same exact thing. I've got to rework a wire that they didn't take into account, but that's okay. All right, I'll show you when it's done. It's not gonna, just seeing wires on the back of the gauges isn't gonna mean anything to you, but I just wanted to go through some of these things that might hold up a guy, might get confused when you're trying to figure out, okay, I want my stock gauges, but I have this universal harness and I don't have a volt gauge. Everything's a little bit different, but we can accomplish the same exact thing, and our gauges will work just like they did in 48. Hi, hey, can you see me among all the mess? I don't know if you can. Try to clear your, we got garbage that can go out there. Anyway, the last thing I need to do for that gauge cluster is the instrument lights. When it's dark, you might want to see. As far as instrument lights, we got 2 on the gauge cluster, 2 on the speedometer, 1 in the ignition switch, 1 in the clock, and then we have little lights in the glove box, the high beam indicator. Am I getting them all? Anyway. So I'm going through and prepping all of those. I got 2 for the gauges right there. And what I'm doing, I am just reusing the original sockets. Just thought I'd run this through with you guys just in case somebody out there wants to see that. You can get new sockets from like YNZ's Yesterday's Parts, like we've talked about. might as well be punished and see the whole face, you know, not just the head chopped off. You're here watching this, that's reason enough to get punished, right? So I just thought I'd show you what I do. Doesn't mean you have to do it. Okay, so I pull our little contact button out of the socket, and there's a spring, should be a spring in there, just like that, and then that goes down inside the socket. Pull all that off, your original wire. You might even get all the insulation out, just like that. Just a bare wire. Now I take about 6 or 8 inches. All of these get daisy chained to each other, and then they all go to the light switch. So I want 3/4 of an inch about on one end, and if the insulation doesn't all come off the original like this, do about half, you know, 3/4, since we have about 1.5 inches end there. And basically I fold each end over on itself, just like we're mending the old barbed wire fence out back, and twist them. That is why we strip as much as 3/4 of an inch, so that they fold over on themselves and you can get it wrapped around to where it will stay. Get our flux. This guy going. And usually up under the dash, as protected as the wiring is inside the light socket and so forth, usually the wire is going to be in pretty good shape that close to the bulb. Okay, we got her solder. Got her solder. Grab some heat shrink. Trying to rush this with you guys. And we're going to go, I'm not going to cover up the bottom, the base of that little button, the little contact for the light bulb, but right up to it. That is insulated by the plastic collar. This dude right here. Doesn't want to go past my mend. Got my solder too goopy, I guess. There we go. Okay, that and the spring. Back down through the socket. And I have 12-volt bulbs from Chevs of the 40s. I think I ordered a bulb kit. These are the bigger ones. I think it says 57. Get that down in there, and there is one more. We can even test it out. Our battery stuck down in here, but we just ground the base, and yay, we did our job. All right, well, not really a daisy chain per se, but what we got here, of course, we have our white wire, which comes off of the harness connector for our light switch, a single wire. And what I did, I just put the farthest from the switch, which goes in the clock. Now there is one that goes in the glove box, yes, but that is on its own switch, so that gets its own power source, right? You don't want your glove box light just coming on when your lights are on. You want it coming on just when you open the door. So, anyway, so that makes the clock light the farthest from the switch, and then the closest to the switch are the two for our gauge cluster. The next two big ones are for, if you pardon the expression, are for the speedometer. This little one is for our ignition lock. And then the two final that we have, like I say, the glove box and the high beam indicator, which are on their own circuits. So I'm going to work on the high beam. Well, I'll work on both, and that should be it. By the end of this video, I will show you all of these operational. Now, if you want to tee off with wires like I did with the dash light wires, I'm going to do with my high beam indicator. We've got this, so your dimmer switch, you have one circuit going in, two coming out, and your switch is determining whether you're using the low or the high beam circuit. And our high beam indicator is just like a third headlight bulb, right? It's teed off on the high beam circuit, the high beam wire, and so we need to hook into that. We'll see if this stripper wants to do this, but this kind of stripper that grabs and pulls the two sides, and we just do that. I think I'm blocking your view, but that just bunches the sheathing up and pulls that back, and then I can just kind of get a idea here. Snippy snippy, strippy strippy. We wrap it around, we solder it, and then we will insulate it later. The only downside of this type of connection is you can't put heat shrink on it, but a little friction tape, you're just fine. I feel like all I'm doing is summing things up in this video. I'm going to make it as quick as possible, but like I say, it's probably just kind of boring otherwise, and it may be boring now. I'm getting very close to being done with what I can here. I have all of our engine essentials going on here. Starter, battery, basically the battery feed, the main power. This is the starter. This is the alternator, charging doohickey. This is coil feed. Yeah, power to the coil from the switch. And then this is a brown alternator feed going to our clip for our alternator. Since I had to install this kind of backwards of what you would typically want to do, I will have to shorten the brown wire on this end somewhere, but we'll get it, of course, soldered and taken care of and put in a loom, and you'll never know. And then, of course, the short red will join the big red at the back of the alternator when that's on. So that is all set where it needs to go. Should be ready. By groups, I did that. And I'll just I call them bullet connectors. Industry calls them snap connectors, I think, the round ones. So we'll get that all connected like that, and then we can hide them in loom and make all those connections on the left side here, and that'll be good to go. I need to do that yet. Otherwise, everything else under the hood is finished. I need to finish installing our park lights. Headlights are done. The park lights, I believe, are wired. Yeah. Our one working horn is wired. We just need to finish the brown ground wire that goes to the button. And the original is right down here coming out of the column. So we'll need to make sure that's not grounding out otherwise. Let's see, that's our oil pressure. We'll get that. So I think pretty much all of that is done. Going inside. Glove box, clock light, cigarette lighter, all of that is hooked up. Coming to the left, I have the 3 wires that go to our original style ignition switch here, ready to cut. All of our bulbs hanging out. That's the high beam indicator. There's no neutral safety on this car originally, so we're not, you know, along with these wires, we don't have to worry about any of that. The back of our gauges ready to go. The thing I've been putting off the longest is hooking up our turn signal. So I've got all of these loose wires hanging down here. That's the end of that, and it's just uncomfortable kind of jamming yourself in here to work on it, and that's why I've been putting it off. But I have the other side of this connector on the table there. I need to finish crimping, soldering these pins, and then we'll put it in that terminal end and get that hooked up. This is our dome light wire, I believe, so I need to do that. So, turn signals, dome light, and power from our switches to our heaters. And then I'm pretty much done for now. Horn. Well, a guy tends to get in a little bit of a zone working on this stuff and just going for it, you know, and I don't know that a lot of it's terribly interesting to watch either. Pretty repetitive, you know, a lot of cutting wires, a lot of stripping wires, a lot of soldering wires. And then we connect them, and then we move on to the next cutting, stripping, soldering. Over and over we go. I'll just catch you up here in a minute in first person. Right now I'm working on a little harness to go from, so we have 2 blower motors, the one under the dash and the one under the passenger seat. We have 2 switches on the left side of the steering column under the dash. We do have a spot on our fuse panel for a heater, though they did not supply any wiring for said heater, right? So I'm making a little 2-part harness. Will come off that fuse. Both the switches have an old bus fuse on the backside, but that's okay. We'll just be double protected, right, for those old switches. And anyway, I'm gonna solder this up, get that on, get that all connected, and then I'll catch you up what all I've done. And we're getting close-ish to being done with this part of the video, and then all that's left is the engine side. So just let me do a little bit more, and then I'll catch you up. One switch. Ein Schalter. So the annoying thing is I got that new switch installed, and the keys and tumbler were an aftermarket unit, and although they were listed as a 50 or for a 48 model, the key slot is not vertical in the off position. I know you can't see it on camera. I don't know if you can tell there. The key is in the off position there, and it's on an angle. I've been trying to get this one out. This one, you know, the keys are unnecessary in this one. I was gonna pull it out, put it in there anyway. I don't know if that's a good idea, but it's seized in there. I don't know, the locking mechanism to get the tumbler, the thing in and out of the switch, it's not working. So not sure what I'll do there yet, but anyway, oh, I gotta hook the battery up. Alright, battery's hooked up. You can see we have dome lightage with the door open. Gauges light up. These bulbs should light up. If you can see the clock from where you're at. Oh, that's the high beam indicator. Anyway, those are working. The clock is illuminated. Heater motor. Heater motor. Which one is hooked up here? Neither one. Where's my heater? Is this my heater? Okay, apparently I'm not done there. Not my heater? There it is. Okay, so I gotta finish hooking one wire up. Forgot. Anyway. Okay. I guess I better catch you up here before I go too much farther. I would consider myself 99% done under here. In fact, I'm starting to tape up my wires going out to the engine bay. Got turn signals, 3-prong flasher wired in. Got a little jumper wire right here, and I'll explain more of this later. But this jumper takes place of one of the flashers, the other one's not used. You can see that, you know, part the branches here, take a gander. But on my turn signal flasher space, I'm just jumping from one to the other. And then getting power there. It's update time again. We're going to check out the lights in a second. I'm getting everything kind of finalized in place. I will wrap all of this, but I wanted to show you before I do how it's looking. I had my head up somewhere, you know, and I was way overthinking the turn signal situation. I was trying to use the harness and their setup for what we needed to do here. And in the end, when I got all got my head straightened out, you know, pulled out from where it was, that's not necessary. Okay, you use a three-prong flasher. The problem is this has internal indicators, so we need a 3-prong flasher So all I did, we jumpered the turn signal contacts. The hazard relay isn't even being used, but we just jumped that to our post, and then that powers the 3-prong flasher. And then you have your everything you need to go into this unit. And then we just completely don't even use the hazard post or circuit. So that's all pretty much in place. Everything in there. Got that all secure. I will, like I say, I'm going to wrap all of this that I think is necessary, and then we're going to pull this up and secure it even higher up in the dash. Gauges, everything is hooked up, except you can see the speedometer still missing. I finally got the back-ordered speedometer needle, so we will go through that speedometer in a separate video, replace the needle, we'll oil the gauge, and we'll put it back in. But that's just the electronic side of that, is just a few bulbs, and that's it. So anyone can figure that out. But let's take a look at the lights, and then I'll get to wrapping tape. If you are doing this kind of project and you want to make it look as original and pleasing to the eye as you possibly can, of course you want to go with non-insulated terminals. I have typically in the past, just like on the 48 StyleMaster, I went to YNZ's Yesterday's Parts, and I purchased all of the different styles and sizes of rings and forks, and the flag style forks where your wire comes in from the side as opposed to straight on like normal. And I bought those. Well, I needed to restock some. I didn't really like my storage situation for all of that stuff. So I got on eBay, and you can find these under high temp kits. I suppose they're thinking this kind of insulation just melts. I don't know what kind of high temp purpose they're looking at here, but yeah, it's a little expensive. I have no doubt you would pay far more in little kits and bits and pieces of what you needed, but you know, you get a steel case, and this thing a guy can carry around. I think I can even pop that whole tray out of there. Huh. Anyway, I wanted to go more to that style of case, and that's where a large part of your money is going to come from. Nevertheless, that is an option, and then crimping, soldering, and heat shrinking is a breeze. But I have used these kinds of things so many more times than I can count. I just take 2 pliers, hold it, heat it up with a lighter, pull off the plastic, and away you go. More time involved, but certainly doable. And probably when I start running out of this or that, then I will go back to YNZ's and do my restocking. But anyway, just want to show you that. Okay, all right, here we go. Ugh. Yeah, I think it'd be almost worth taking the front seat out anytime you do this kind of job. Just give you an idea of what we got going on here. We got our lighter and our dome light wire and our clock light. Getting her all tied up. I've kind of just done the bare essentials as far as taping. I don't want to get too carried away, because a guy may always need to do a little diagnosis, you know. And it's all hidden back here. Looks like I could have done a little bit better job there, but anyway, got my turn signal harness kind of tied up there. I might throw a zip tie on that or something. Got the back of the switch, our gauges, the light switch, all of that will remain as it is. Fuse block, 3-prong flasher just hanging out there. But everything is up out of sight and secure, which is the main consideration. Somehow I think this is sideways. Now I got a problem going back with our trim, which is on the fender at the moment, but my new light switch overlaps where the edge of the trim needs to be. I have big problems when guys do stuff like this. They do modifications, and instead of modifying the aftermarket garbage, they tend to take drills and hacksaws and torches to original equipment. I got a problem with that, but to each his own, I suppose. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make sure this lock ring is secure and in the place I want it. And then I'm going to come in and I'll remove it, and I'm going to file a flat spot right on top, and that trim piece will overlap that and you'll never notice. I think that's always the better move than elongating the hole in the dash so the switch can move down. You're modifying an original dash, or grinding and cutting out an original trim piece. Why would you want to ruin the valuable stuff for the sake of a cheap piece of junk that doesn't even fit? So, okay, this is neither cheap nor, I hope, a piece of junk, but it doesn't work for the application. So, I'm going to do that real quick. All right, there's that. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that. I can fully appreciate the fact that in order to change or work on your switch in the future or whatever, you will have to remove this trim piece, but I mean, let's be realistic here. How often do you have to work on a light switch? I mean, I've had vehicles for years. I never had to pull one out. And if it comes to that, a matter of a few minutes would get 2 clips and a nut off the trim, and then out the light switch comes. So I really don't see it as being a problem. But that will work. Now, my last concern for this video is the horn. I have everything hooked up. The bare bones kit has a horn relay, looks like a regular relay, installed on there already. But I'm not getting consistent horn action. Okay, and this is what it sounds like when I ground the switch, or the, ground the what would be the horn ring. We got the relay clicking, and I just tried this a few minutes ago, and the horn did go for 2 or 3 times, and now it just clicks again. So I wanted to test that it is not my wiring, it's not the relay, it's not the bare bones panel, it's none of that. So I came up here with an awesome testing rig. I've got a test lead on my horn wire. That's the power wire coming out of the relay to the horn itself. And I've got that hooked on to a test light. And then I've got the test light grounded. And so if I ground our relay, we're getting power to the horn. So it is in the horn, and that's unfortunate because that was the only horn that worked. This other one did not. So I may have to scavenge a horn. But it could also very well be grounding issue, because a lot of this is just rusty. So, oh, that may not help the situation. It's kind of cockeyed in there. Let me see if that... Okay. Well then, I will put some more hardware on this stud, clean that up, and then we should get a good ground. Is there one on the other side? No, there's nothing there. Okay, I will attach the horn. We'll get a good ground, and then good to go. And under the hood here, I've got all of this wrapped. A lot of our smaller ones, I just put some of that cloth loom on there, and it's loom going out to the headlights. Horn is hooked up. I think I mentioned at the beginning of this one or the end of the last one or sometime how I'm doing this crossover harness here through the radiator support. So we'll get that going, and then I'll make it, once it's connected and in place, then I'll finish wrapping that up and make it look a little more presentable. But that is all the wiring. Literally all we have left here. Once the engine is in place, this goes to the starter, these two the alternator, and this is our coil, and that is practically it, other than the battery and the cables that will need to be wired once that is installed. I got to get horns in there secured, got to get some fine thread hardware. I've been working on, you might remember when I took this shroud off of here, our grill was completely loose, and I've been working on getting screws into that from inside the fenders there. So that's going to be a lot more solid. Just kind of get her spruced up for a guy. I need to look for another trim ring around the headlight. But that, I believe, for this episode is going to do it. Now our brake lights are on full time because the pedal spring and that stuff is not hooked up. So these are brake lights right now. And then tail lights. Should be left turn. Should be right turn. Should be hazards. All right. Go to park lamps. Of course, headlights. Dims or highs and dims. Left turn, right turn, hazards. There you go, guys. One more large hurdle out of the way on this project, and that is the lion's share of the electricals, getting back together. So excited that everything is working as it should, and we're just going to keep moving. Hopefully we can keep this momentum up on this project and get it back to the owner this spring. One of the more exciting aspects is our 1954 235 is back from the machine shop, and we're already playing around with going back together with it, so you will be seeing that. I have the majority of the parts for that to happen. Then the transmission go back in, and there are a few other small little odds and ends. We need to look over the front end, the steering and suspension, make sure everything is good there. The brakes are all in good shape. We have new lines, previously installed brakes and wheel cylinders, and I believe a new master cylinder. We just need to get fluid in it and make sure it's all holding, nothing's leaking, and away we go. Few other little things that I need to talk to him about before we release it back into the wild, you know, but like I say, hopefully we can keep this going and get it back to them very, very soon. So I really appreciate you guys hanging around with me, and please come back for the next one. God bless you. Bye-bye.